Welcome back everyone. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to write for loops. And in the last video, we looked at a while loop and we wrote it with a condition saying if the counter, which started off at 0, is less than 10,000, execute whatever's in the while loop. In this case, we're saying, hey, turn off the lights 10,000 times. 10,000 times. I've gone ahead and changed that to just 10, making it a lot easier for us to run the application and not having to wait. So we see here it goes 1 through 10, turn off the lights, and once it exits that while loop block of code, as the condition is no longer met, it says press enter to terminate the program. Okay, very well. The last note I wanted to go ahead and talk about was as we increment the value of counter, we've seen that we're only incrementing the value by 1 as the code is executed for each iteration of the while loop. So the first time we run through this, the counter set at 0, we increment it by 1, and then it's 1. The second time we increment it again, and it's 2. Another way you can actually write this that is considered a little bit more shorthand is just by simply writing counter plus plus. Yep, that's it. If you're incrementing the value by 1, you can actually go ahead and increment values for integer variables by just writing plus plus. This will be the exact same thing. Let's go ahead and run our program and we can see that nothing has changed for the end user. We still run it 10 times and we say turn off the lights, and the while loop no longer meets the condition once the counter is at 10, and we say please enter to terminate the program. Okay, so for loop, let's go ahead and write one. Let's see what the difference is. We're going to go ahead and write for and open and close parentheses. And there's 3 pieces to a for loop. Number 1 is we're going to go ahead and declare a variable, and this will be an integer. In this case, it's going to be integer I, and it equals 0. We terminate the first piece by using our semicolon, and the second piece is the condition for the for loop. So we're going to say the exact same thing we did with our while loop. While I is less than 10, go ahead and execute our for loop. And the last piece is going to be our iterator for our, it'll be the addition or the incrementation of our variable, which is I. So we're going to say I plus plus. And you can see IntelliSense is already trying to help me write this for loop. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set up an integer I as 0. The condition is I is less than 10. And we're going to say for every time we iterate through the for loop, go ahead and increment the value by 1. That's the exact same thing we're doing here, okay? And so we're going to write the exact same thing, console.writeLine, and we're going to go ahead and say counter, concatenate it to our text, turn off the lights. Okay, in this case, it's not counter, it's going to be I. So I is our counter. And that's referenced up in the for loop. Let's go ahead and run this. Okay, very well. So we see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It technically ran 10 times. It's a little bit different from our while loop. Let's go ahead and loop. I'm going to go ahead and write a separator so we can see the difference between the for loop and the while loop. And you can see the for loop ran from 0 to 10. Technically, it's 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. While our while loop ran 10 times as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is that the I is being incremented after we iterate through the for loop. And as you can tell in the while loop, I went ahead and incremented our counter before we actually wrote to the console. So let's go ahead and move this over to the end. Let me get rid of this. Now let's run it one more time. And we have the exact same thing. I just wanted to go ahead and note that so you can see the difference on why they were both a little bit different. The while loop used to start on the number 1, and that's because we incremented the value before we wrote to the console, and that's what the for loop is doing as well. So they're both running 10 times. We're starting off with 0, and 0 is the first time it runs because it meets the condition of I is less than 10. In this case, it would be 0 is less than 10. And the condition is no longer met once the I has a value of 10. Same thing is happening with the counter. And this is pretty much how you would write a for loop versus a while loop. You can tell that the declaration of the counter is integrated within the for loop, rather than having to write it outside of the while loop. If you wanted to actually count how many times you iterated through the while loop. But for loops are very useful for considering like a situation where you want to count how many, let's say you had 30 students in a classroom, and you say, hey, for every student, I want to go ahead and, grade their assignment. So it's going to iterate through every single student, and then this block of code gets executed. A while loop doesn't really know what variable we are iterating through, or what count we're iterating through. So you can see a perfect example in line 22. I had to implement my own counter, and then I went ahead and added and incremented that counter within the while loop code. So you can technically just write a while loop, just how it is, while true, just like that. Whoops, what's it complaining about? Oh yeah, we no longer have that. Okay, so you can technically run a while loop forever. It doesn't need a variable to be integrated into its declaration. It's just while something is true, I'm going to run. And this is running so fast we can't even keep a count. Opposed to a for loop, it's always going to have a declaration of the integer for the iterations. In this case, it's going to be the I. So I starts at 0. We can also start it at 9. Let's take a look. And it's only, whoops, sorry about that. I got to get rid of the while loop. Let's comment that out. Let's run that. And we can see that it only ran once. Well, let's see. Why did it only run once? 9, turn off the lights. Well, remember, I is 9, and 9 is less than 10, so it meets the condition. We run it. We then increment it by 1, which makes I 10. 10 is less than 10, no longer, and that's it. We can also do less than or equal to 10. Less than or equal to 10, and we'll see the iteration run twice, or the for loop meet the condition twice. We'll have a 9 and a 10. But that is the difference between for loops and while loops. So have fun with this. Create your own for loops. Mess around with the iterations in how many, what the condition is. You can also set it to 10,000, just like we did on our last video, and it'll do the exact same thing as the while loop. But I just wanted you guys to notice the difference between the for loop and the while loop. They're both very useful. You'll definitely use them in programming, but you want to understand the concept and differences on how they're written and how they kind of operate in programming. Well, that's it for today. If you guys liked the video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I know these concepts are new and sometimes it's a little hard to explain, but I do my best. So leave a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe. Catch you next time. Thank you.